So we have this weird ending to the thing about giving up all your possessions, and it's honestly a weird ending to a really weird text about like hating everybody and hating life and all this, okay? To get to the answer, to answer the question that I think a lot of you are probably wondering, which is what is going on in today's gospel, I gotta step back and talk about how we understand works and faith and salvation in the Christian life. Because that's what it's getting at, but it's easier to sort of go about it in a roundabout way. Okay? Is that fair? So let's talk about the role of works and faith. Now, when we talk about anything where we're talking about these big Christian concepts, you got to realize, like, we as mainline Protestants are unique in how we look at this. We look at it differently than evangelicals. We look at it differently than Catholicism. Okay? When we look at this, we look at a tension, where each one of them tries to go to an extreme that doesn't work. We do this because we realize the Bible both says you are saved by your faith, right? Paul, many times. But also says faith without works is dead, right? See, we grasp with the reality that both of those are in the Bible, and we work to say, how can both be true? So over here you have Catholicism. Especially if you go back to like medieval Catholicism, it's a little less today. Catholicism is going to go ahead and say basically, you need to be a good person or you go to hell. And when they say good person, they have books written about what it means to be a good person. You need to do these good things, right? And avoid these bad things. I mean, most of canon law is listing whether or not something is good or whether or not something is bad, and exactly when something goes from being good to being bad, right? And especially with medieval Catholicism, what you have is essentially a theological question about salvation be answered by an accountant, right? Where you go in and they say, well, there are these levels of sins, like these are really bad and these are less bad and these are a little bad, so let's give them like -5, -3, -1 points. And then you have like really good actions and then sort of good actions and not so great actions. And so you want to do like the good things to sort of balance out the bad things, and hopefully the scale comes out more good than bad, right? And of course, part of that's rituals, part of that's a whole slew of things. Now, that then leads to all sorts of things, like purgatory, because eventually someone steps up and goes, hey, it's not great if I pass and the other guy's only slightly worse and I go to heaven and goes to hell. That doesn't seem right. And they're like, oh, you're right, it doesn't, so we'll make purgatory. And someone else asks, hey, just out of curiosity, guys, if I have to be more good than bad, how much more good than bad? Is like 70 a passing grade, or is like 68 okay? Like, what grading scale are we working on here? And if I do like a lot of good things, is it okay if I go do like a bad thing? See, the problem is once you frame it that way, once you start framing that it's about the good versus the bad of what you do, and that's what salvation's about, you end up going down these sort of ridiculous roads. These roads where you're trying to figure out, well, how much more good than the bad I did? I did this really bad thing. How many good things do I need to do to weigh it out? And the reality is, no one knows if that's how it works. Luckily enough, that's not how it works. See, that's hearing that's hearing James and ignoring Paul. On the other extreme, evangelicals and non-denominationals. Now, they're going to tell you right off the bat, Catholicism's wrong. They're into works righteousness. And what we are into is faith. You are saved by your faith, right? That's why you got to come on up and you got to say, I renounce evil and I choose Jesus, right? Remember in the 1980s when everyone was like knocking on your door saying, have you chosen Jesus? Have you found Jesus? Right? What they're talking about in the evangelical world is they want to make sure that you have faith, because in their world they say if you have faith, you are good to go. But there's a problem if you just say it that way, if you just stop there, if all you do is pay attention to Paul and not hear James at all. The problem is, how do you know if you have faith? How do you know if someone else has faith? How do you know you're not deceiving yourself to have faith? How do you know that you have the right faith, not the wrong faith? This is why in the evangelical denominations there's like 7,000 of them, because if you ask someone what does it mean to have the right faith versus the wrong faith, they will come up with very definitive lines that they all disagree with. This is how you get the Yazoo, Mississippi River Baptist. Because only those Baptists in the Yazoo, Mississippi region believed in that whatever it was that separates them from all the others. Here's the funny part of that. Doesn't it all sound like a whole bunch of works to you? You got to believe the right way. You got to believe the right thing. You got to come up here at the altar call and commit yourself to Jesus. You got to get rebaptized, every time you get into trouble. You got to be born again. You got to be born by the Spirit. It sounds like a heck of a lot of works. So the irony is, if all you do is hear Paul and ignore James, you end up with just a different list of works, which is not what either of them want. See, us mainline Protestants say and acknowledge both exist in the Bible, and we're desperately trying to follow that, right? So how can they exist? It's simple. You are saved by faith. The evangelicals are not wrong with that. But James doesn't say you're saved by works. He says faith without works is dead. What does he mean? Well, it is absolutely faith alone that saves you. If you have faith, and if you're wondering, it isn't about having the correct faith, like having the right theology. It's not about having done the right rituals. It's not about making sure you've clicked the I've gone to church button enough times. It's about digging down inside yourself and saying, what is my relationship with Christ? Does being a Christian, does that center of faith that I claim to have move me? And have me do something I otherwise wouldn't do for the good of others who cannot pay me back? Do I get up on a Sunday morning and help harvest some potatoes for people I'll never meet, who will never be able to give me anything? Why? Because my faith gets me to do something crazy like that, like help my fellow human. Or go paint a middle school. Or go package some food for some firefighters. Or go get some school supplies for some kids who need it. See, if you ever sit there and go, do I really have faith, or am I deceiving myself? James gives you the answer. He says, look at the fruit you create. If your fruit is of God, if you're helping your fellow human, if you're doing good that you otherwise wouldn't do, then God's faith is active in you. God is leading you to help your fellow human. You have faith, therefore you are saved. It's not about how much, how well you do it, whether or not you colored inside the lines properly enough or said the right prayers or did it enough times. It's about whether or not you were transformed. Because if you have faith, you're transformed and being transformed always. I say all that because what Jesus is getting at in this whole hate your mother, hate your father, hate your kids thing isn't that he wants you to actually hate your family. What he's getting at is that if you are a person of faith, your number one driving question in your life isn't how do I get promoted, how do I get a better house, how do I get more fame, or whatever else might be out there. Your number one driving question is, what is God calling me to be? Today, tomorrow, and forever. Who is God calling me to help? Today, tomorrow, forever. So as you go out today, take a few moments in that prayer life, and I hope you have one. If not, it's as simple as starting. And ask yourself that question. God, where are you leading me today, tomorrow, to be the new person you call me to be? Amen.